Welcome back to another Piece of Solution class. Please be seated. Today we are going to pick up where we left off on page 16 in the last class. And we are going over the negative character traits. And the previous teacher already covered the first two, so I'm going to pick up on the third, being impatient. Now before we get into these negative character traits, make sure that we keep in mind that we are doing what? We're teaching other teachers to teach about how to interact in their workplace, right? So I know we've gone through the intermediate series and we're keeping in mind, personally how this affects us or how it can affect a school environment. But when we go through these, really be thinking about these in the context of a workplace and the work environment, because I'm going to have some questions for you after. So picking up on the third character trait, it is impatient, which is to be short-tempered and easily aggravated. For example, Jane needed to speak to her supervisor, but he was with a customer. So she checked back 3 more times in 5 minutes, but he was still occupied. Finally, she interrupted and said she needed to talk to him. Now, how many of us have ever been in a situation where someone was impatient with us? We could all raise our hands, right? And how many of us have ever been in a situation where we were the ones who were impatient? Okay, so we can see both sides of the coin, right? Sometimes when you're the person that really needs something, are you really thinking about everyone else around you or what they're doing and how important what they're doing is? Not necessarily. You're more focusing on the reason why you're trying to get a hold of them, right? And then as the person that's being interrupted, you're thinking, can you wait a second? Like, I'm doing something. So on both sides, we've been on both sides of that coin. We've seen where we're the person who's been impatient, and we've been on the recipient of that. The fourth one is being dishonest or untrustworthy, which is to be deceitful and unable to be trusted. Fifth one is arrogant, which is proud, overbearing, not humble. Next one is to be envious, to resent what someone has, but at the same time, wanting what he or she possesses. Next one is to be selfish, which is a lack of concern for the needs of others and only thinking about oneself. This is a very strong one, hateful, an intense emotion that results in extreme dislike and hostility. Now that one most definitely will be damaging to a workplace, don't you agree? If you had a very hateful environment. Next one is to be aggressive, which is to be hostile or violent behavior that can be both physical and verbal. Lacking self-control, which is to act impulsively, and we know the definition of self-control, right? So the exact opposite of that. Pessimistic, unable to see the positive side of a situation, always thinking negatively. Revengeful, to seek retaliation or desire to get even. Or irresponsible, not completing duties or tasks, or not accountable for one's actions. Then underneath there it says, do you recognize any of these character traits in yourself? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. It says, although it might be difficult to admit that we have some of these negative traits, changing them begins with being honest with ourselves. So isn't that funny? In order for us to eliminate negative character traits, we have to have at least one positive character trait, the character trait of being honest. To eliminate a negative character within a negative trait from our character, the first thing we can do is to determine how that negative trait affects ourselves and others. Secondly, evaluate what might be the underlying cause of the negative trait. Now, I'm going to share an experience with you that really helped me understand. So I have a friend who, she's kind of shy and she doesn't really like to talk to people too much. And so when she goes out in public, she'll always ask me, does this look okay or does that look okay? I don't want people to say this about me or people to say that about this, or I don't want people to say anything. And then one time, I'd walked by and something I was wearing was out of place. And she came up to me, she's like, oh, I have to apologize because I didn't know it was you. And I whispered to my friend something about what you were wearing. And we kind of laughed about it. And it really made me stop and think. What she was afraid of people doing to her was a behavior that she recognized within herself. So oftentimes, the character traits that we are so quick to be like, oh my word, it's so annoying when so-and-so does that. I really don't like it when someone does that. Do we recognize it because we might do it to other people without realizing it? Sometimes those character traits, we allow them to slip into the category of personality and say, oh, that's just kind of part of who I am, or I'm this way, or I'm that way. But when we really stop to think about it, they're actually negative character traits. So that first step is very important, that honesty. And sometimes we don't like to be honest, but having that self-reflection, remember we talked about self-concept, the ability to stop and take a look of who you are as a person without any preconceived notions. And secondly, evaluate what might be the underlying cause. Now, that is very, very important. So if I were you, I would underline that. Underlying cause. Because remember, this is a thought-provoking program that searches for solutions. We don't like to slap Band-Aids on top of things. And one very helpful thing to help you understand that is dealing with children. Because as we know, children can act out. We know that, right? We just went through the parenting unit. But there's always an underlying cause. There's always a root of the problem. And extending that compassion to ourselves to take the moment to understand, why am I why am I this way? Instead of just beating yourself up about it, that can definitely help you to root out those negative character traits and replace them with a positive character trait once you understand the reason why. Give us an example here. It says, for example, could the cause be insecurities? Are you envious? Do you have a tendency to lack self-control? Regardless of the underlying cause of a negative trait, the point is to acknowledge the harm it causes in your life and the lives of others, and then begin weeding it out of your character. And then again, we have the analogy of weeding there. I don't know if you've ever weeded, but if you just pluck the top of it out, it comes right back. There's no purpose. So you have to dig to the underlying cause and understand how it branches out. We talked about the ripple effect. That, okay, yes, it's a part of you that you want to change, but it affects others around you and in your life as well. It says, use the following chart to analyze any negative character trait, what the root cause of that trait may be, and some of the possible effects of having that trait as part of your character. Now, I wanted to do this as a class, but let's just take one for example. Let's take being pessimistic. Negative or positive character trait? Negative. Okay? Now, what are some things that can cause you to be pessimistic? Let's stop and think about it. Could it be the way that you were raised? Could it be your upbringing? Could it be the people that you surround yourself with? Could it be your own thought patterns? What are the effects that it has? It's going to bring down your mood, for one. You're never going to be joyful or looking forward to anything. That's going to branch out to the people around you. They're going to, when you walk in the door, everyone's going to put their armor on so they know you're coming with your sad face. Different things like that, right? What about envious? I don't know if you've ever worked with someone who was envious. Thankfully, I have not had the opportunity. But if someone's constantly envious of something that you're doing, maybe they might undermine the things that you're doing. Maybe you will undermine someone else. Is that beneficial for the whole workplace? Most definitely not. So those are just some examples of how some things that might seem like personal problems then spill out to the workplace. It says, now that you have identified some of the traits that need changing, how do you go about eliminating the negative? Now, before we cover that, let's go back to page 14. Because page 14 tells us how to develop positive character traits. So we've covered what some of those negative traits are. We've covered what the positive are. Now we're going to compare both sides. How do we develop positive character traits, and how do we eliminate negative ones? So, does anyone with a loud voice want to read the first step? Anybody? Yes, please. Thank you.
Consider why you want to obtain a certain positive character trait.
Okay, so consider why. I don't know about you, but ever since I was little, I've always wanted to understand why. And sometimes it's okay to stop and think, why? Why do I want to achieve this positive character trait? Because remember, like we learned in the character unit, page 73, it's that value. First, we have to find the value and the importance in it before we imitate and practice it. So why? Why are positive character traits important? Number 2, list all the ways that achieving that positive character trait will improve your life. Okay? This also gives you an opportunity to stop and reflect. Hey, there are some things that, I need to change. Okay, this is how this positive trait can help me. Remember, accentuate the positive, negate the negative. And then 3, evaluate all the ways that achieving that positive character trait will greatly improve the lives of your coworkers, family, and friends. So then we're going beyond just ourselves, how will it improve me, but how will it improve those around me? So we're going an extra step there. Okay, and on page 15, we have this very nice assessment, so to speak, that's broken those 3 steps down. So it tells us to list some positive character traits, and if you want, you can do this in your own personal books and encourage your teachers to also do this in their personal books because it helps you kind of stop and reflect. Okay, how can developing these traits help to improve your personal life? How can developing these traits help to improve your professional life? And what are some ways you can develop these traits? At the bottom here, it says developing positive character traits takes commitment, dedication, and consistency. Changing yourself from the inside out is not always easy, but is well worth the effort. And at the bottom there, you can reference the character unit, page 15 and 16, because those really help us talk about those character traits that we need to develop a positive character. So, when we talk about that, taking the time to stop and evaluate ourselves before we, start to break down the things that we want to accomplish in developing our positive character, it takes some character traits to do that. It takes the honesty like we talked about, but it also takes humility to be able to stop and realize, hey, maybe in this situation, there's something I could have done better. Maybe in this coworker that I don't really get along with, there's something that I can do to help that situation. Okay, so let's go on to page 18, which is the steps to eliminate negative character traits. And we're going to spend some time on this page because these 9 steps are very important. The first step is to set your mind in advance to decide you want to eliminate a negative character trait. Now, why do you think that's important? Why do you think they said set your mind in advance? Because we are creatures of habit. Okay, anyone else is a creature of habit? I like a routine, right? I do something, I do it over and over and over again. If the slightest little thing gets out of my routine, I have taught myself to deal with the curveballs and setbacks, but we like routine, right? So when we're going to change something, we can't just up and go change it. How many of you have ever tried to start a new schedule? Did it work the very first day? Did it work the very first few days? How many of you have ever tried doing a new diet or changing the way that you eat? Did it work right away? No. So first we have to tell ourselves that, hey, look, this is not going to be an instantaneous process. It's something that we have to accept that it's going to be something that we have to commit to, that consistency, that dedication. It says, consider the harm and hurt that trait brings to others and to yourself. Clear your mind of thoughts such as, it doesn't really matter if I'm jealous or not. It doesn't affect anyone else. Hold yourself accountable for your every thought and set your mind to correct any negative thinking so you can become the person you truly want to be. Okay, so if you want, you can reference the character unit, page 80, what does that talk about? Anyone remember? Yes, setting your mind in advance. And you can also reference the Building Moral Excellence, page 125, and the Self-Control Unit, page 73, which talks about our hot and cold thoughts. Because we're setting ourselves up for failure if we say, oh my word, I have to change this, it's going to take me forever, I don't really know why I have to change this trait. Right after that, you're setting yourself up for failure. And again, understanding the value and hold yourself accountable for that every single thought, which can be pretty exhausting. How many of you have ever tried doing that? Analyzing every single thought? It can be pretty exhausting, but again, accountable. We're responsible for the things that we think. We're responsible for the way that they not just affect ourselves, but they affect others. Number 2, focus on practicing self-control in all situations. This means you have to be prepared ahead of time, set your mind in advance, to deal with the situation when it comes up. Be prepared to stop, think, and consider your actions, and always choosing to do the right thing. A right choice is one that will not bring harm or hurt to yourself, others, property, possessions, or the environment. So there's a lot of things that we have to consider. When we're practicing self-control, will it harm yourself? Will it harm others, property, possessions, or the environment? Let's take that into the workplace, for example. Now remember, our environment isn't just the physical building, right? It could be the atmosphere. It could be the way that you feel around people. That's also part of an environment. So when we don't practice self-control, if it's any way that it can change the environment of our workplace, if it can change the way that people feel about being there in a negative way, it's categorized as a wrong choice. Because remember, our environment's not just something that's physical. If it changes the way that we think about being there, if our actions change the way that someone else can feel about being in our presence, categorized as a wrong choice because it negatively affects that environment. Others, the people in our workplace, property, and possessions. In all situations, no matter what they may be, need self-control. And you can reference the self-control unit, page 8 there as well, and the grade 5 unit, page 170. And those really go into detail about, it's part of our morality is realizing that at no point in time do we stop becoming responsible for our thoughts, our feelings, and our actions in the way that they affect others. And that leads us to point number 3, think of others. Stop thinking about yourself and consider the other person's feelings in any given situation. Now, what positive character trait does that require? Just yell it out. Compassion. Any other ones that you can think of? I can't hear you. I was thinking of compassion. I was also thinking of empathy, the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. Now, how many of us really stop and analyze the things that we do? Anyone? I do. Okay, so when I do something, I stop and analyze. Why did I do that? Why? What led me to be able to do this? And oftentimes, I can come up with a reason, okay? I was late because this occurred and that occurred and that occurred. Okay, next time I'm going to try this. But I understand why I was late. The door slammed on my finger and I had to stop and put ice water on it. And I understand that. And when I come to work, I understand, okay, I was late because I slammed the door. Now, when your coworker comes to work late, did you see her slam her finger in the door? No. Did you see her rush through and spill a cup of water on the floor? Did you see all the things that went on behind the scenes? No. But when it comes to you, you can understand, right? You can rationalize, oh, I did this because I was feeling this way at the time and this occurred, and we can have that compassion for ourselves sometimes, right? So then we got to go a step further and extend that same compassion, empathy to others, and not always think of the worst immediately. And sometimes we have a habit to do that, right? See something, oh my word, I can't believe she did that. Why would she do that? Okay, yeah, why? What are some of the reasons that you would extend that same compassion to yourself and extend that to the other person? Okay, and then number 4, remember, 2 wrongs never make a right. Does that sound familiar? Remember reading that time and time again about 5 times? Where did we read that? Anyone remember? Yes, in the preface of the intermediate series, we started off with the author telling us that his father drilled into his mind that 2 wrongs never make a right. It says behaving in a negative way towards someone who behaved negatively towards you will never help the situation or create a peaceful environment. Again, responding to disrespect. We had a whole chapter about that 2 wrongs never make a right, but responding to disrespect with more disrespect is like adding fuel to the fire. Now, going back to step 3, that empathy, that thinking of others, is what's going to help you put out that fire. 2 wrongs that make it right, if we stop and we evaluate, okay, why does the person do this? Extend empathy towards them, try to understand, to go beyond just the surface level, then it can help us to, okay, take a step, calm down. I don't have to respond with that same attitude. I don't have to respond with that same tone of voice. I don't have to respond with a similar action. I can then extend the compassion, the empathy that person needs at that moment. Okay, so you can reference the respect unit, page 19 there as well, and we had that whole responding to disrespect section. Number 5, have confidence in your own abilities. You have been trained for the work you do. You are able to do your job successfully, and you can ask for help when you need to. Okay? So that right there takes positive character traits, takes humility, right? And it takes responsibility. And sometimes we don't think of responsibility as believing in ourselves, but it takes belief in our abilities and belief in the training that we've received and belief in the people over us to understand that, okay, I was given this responsibility. I'm going to take it now and do it to my best, and I have the capability to do that. Now I'm going to share an example with you. Many of you know that I work with children, okay? Many of us know this. Little fact, I necessarily didn't really see myself working with children. I grew up around them, obviously, and I would do things, and I wanted to go do other things and do this and do that and do that, and somehow I always ended up back with children. And I was like, okay, alrighty then. And I try to get out of it and go do this and go do that, and I would end up back with children. And then I got my own classroom, and I said, what in the world? I'm back here again. And when I first started, I was terrified. I was like, why am I doing this? Why do I have this job? I have to sit here and I have to form these little minds, and I have to train them and I have to teach them. Who decided to give me this job? But then I had to stop and think, okay, this is a responsibility that's given to me, and I owe it to them to do it to the best of my ability. I owe it to them to take the time to learn whatever I need to learn, put my own thoughts and feelings aside, how I feel about it, what I want to do, my own insecurities, and to say, I owe it to them. I have a responsibility to them to be the best that I can be. And that's what I try to do all the time. So sometimes we don't have confidence in our abilities right away. We kind of have to, okay, that's the way I feel, that's nice. But I have a responsibility. I have a job to do. I have an obligation. I have an accountability to treat the people in a workplace you interact with the respect that they deserve because they are a human being. Okay? Again, it says, you are able to do your job successfully and can ask for help when you need to. There's nothing wrong with that. Yes, it takes humility, but asking for help is not just about you. It's not about, okay, I need to do this better. It's how can I do it better to help others? When you think about it that way, it doesn't make it seem so bad. You're not just asking for yourself, you're asking for those that you're helping as well. It says, don't compete with others, but rather determine to always strive to improve yourself. Your skills are unique and special to you. Don't put all your time and attention on what others bring to their work. That's on them. Work on making yourself the best at whatever you do. And as a workplace, it's a team. No matter what you do, it's a team. One person, yes, they could do your job, but if they're doing your job and theirs, there's something else that's falling, right? So when you take out the animosity and the competition, you're all working for a goal. And when you work for a goal, you get things accomplished. And the people that you help, people that you serve, they reap the rewards of that as well as your environment. Number 6, stop for a moment and consider the consequences of your actions. Bad choices always, that's big and bold, come back to affect us in one way or another. Okay, and we can reference, the Character Unit Chapter 5, ripple effect. Fact that we may not see it, but always, no matter what, they always come back. They may not come back to us. They can come back to the people around us. They can come back time after we're gone. But they always, no matter what, they always come back. For example, if you're verbally abusive to someone else, it shows your own lack of respect and will affect your reputation. Okay, and you can also reference the Respect Unit, page 11 and page 55. Talk about communicating effectively. Okay, but it's also important to remember that our consequences of our actions, as we know, they don't just affect us, but when they come back, they can sometimes make it harder in that development of our positive character. Some things that you do, you don't see how those consequences are going to come back and face an even bigger challenge for you. Whether it's a form of trust, if you break someone's trust, we know how hard it is to work back at that. Just different things like that, they can affect us in ways that are unforeseen. Number 7, find appropriate outlets for frustrations. This might mean taking deep breaths, going for a long walk at lunch, or even speaking to your supervisor. We have some others. We have, the counting to 10. We have the cool thoughts. We have the STOP acronym, as we are very well versed with and we continue to verse ourselves in. Okay, so we have very many avenues. It could be personal avenues, whether you get down from work and you like to, if cleaning is stress relieving. You organize your desk at work, or when you come home you clean. Whether it's singing, whether it's art, whether it's, no matter what it may be, finding that appropriate outlet then doesn't lead to that displacement that we talked about, also in the self-control unit, that comes when we leave things unresolved. Okay, so you can reference that self-control unit, page 75 through 77, tells us how to deal with anger. Okay, and also that anger is a what kind of emotion? Secondary, which means that something always comes before it. So while you're finding the outlet, stop and evaluate, why am I feeling frustrated? What is it that caused me to feel this way? Is there something that I can eliminate? Is there a way that I should better interact? All of those things, back to thinking about ourselves and others, can help us eliminate those frustrations as well. Number 8 says, look for a solution in every situation you are struggling with. Rather than focus on the problem, use positive character traits to find a solution. Control your emotions to avoid doing or saying something you will regret. If you are unable to find a solution on your own, talk to your supervisor. Okay, and there's something that I always like to remind myself, is that as human beings, we have a very special ability, and that is the power of choice. Okay? We have the ability that no matter what situation we're in, there's always a choice. And if that's comforting to you, remember that. This doesn't matter what, there's always 2 types of choices, a positive one and a negative one, which means that no matter what problem you're in, there's always a solution. And going back to that humility, finding help in any point in time is always okay, because it doesn't just benefit you, it benefits others. But we have to be willing to put the effort into finding that solution. Okay, and I don't know if you've ever tried to help someone who doesn't really want to be helped, right? And you can give all the solutions in the world, but it's like there's a brick wall, right? So it takes, how many of you have ever been that someone before, right? So it takes both parties to be able to put the effort into finding that solution. Because sadly enough, solutions don't just come waltzing by for us to reach out and grab. We have to put the work into them. Okay? And number 9 is arguably the most important one, is to keep trying and 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 never stopping. It says, even if you do not handle a situation in the right way, realize you can start right that minute to try again. Right that minute. You can apologize and be determined to try again and do better the next time. Building positive moral character and eliminating negative character traits should be your 2 main focal points that will progress over time. And this is also a very important line. Give yourself room to grow. And that room to grow is on the character unit pages 88 through 89, that being patient with yourself. Now, I've had to learn that positive character traits don't just extend to others, they extend to myself as well. Because how can I go into a situation with self-control if I didn't take the time and the compassion to understand why I might be frustrated in a situation? That frustration will only perpetuate into further situations. So understanding that you are not perfect, right? And that's okay, because that means that you have all the time, you have all the rest of your life, all the rest of your interactions to strive to be better and improve not just yourself, but the environment of those around you. And that is where I'm going to stop for today, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the next teacher.
Okay, give Ketsi a nice hand. She did a great job, didn't she? One of our young teachers, but she is very, very wise in this program. So we're going to continue this evening, and we're going to go to the lesson plan, back to the lesson plan. And we're going to go to procedure 5. And to make it easy, you might want to put some tabs, because then you can easily get to back to your lesson plans, just some little tabs. On page 5, not procedure 5, page 5, sorry about that. Procedure 8, inform students that now that they have a better understanding of character, they can focus on understanding what personality is and how the 2 are different. Reiterate that personality is the sum of our likes, dislikes, and attitude. Read or have students read pages 19 and 20. That's right, class? The selection entitled, How Does Your Personality Affect the Workplace? And we're going to learn about that. When I was going over this earlier, I was just like, wow, in the workplaces, we have like a mix of different personalities, do we not? A mix. of different personalities. So reiterate that personality is the sum of your likes and dislikes and attitude. Have students read page 19 and 20 entitled How Does Personality Affect the Workplace? Have students complete the What's Your Personality exercise on page 20 and allow volunteers to share with the class some of their personality traits and type of personalities that they like in others. And even though we like certain things with others, we don't always get to pick the exact personalities that we like when we work, right? So let's jump over now. We're going to jump over to page 19 now that I know where I'm at. Page 19. And it says personality here, and we're going to put procedure 8 on the top of the page like we normally do. And remembering that we are teaching this to teachers who are going into the workplaces, and sometimes they're the actual managers of the workplace, but sometimes they go in and they actually help to train the people in the workplace. Have you ever heard where people will actually go in and they'll actually train the people in the workplace to be able to get along? And people pay for that. But we're going to learn it for free, okay? For free. So on page 19, it says, how does personality affect the workplace? So I want you to be thinking now of all the people that you might work with as teachers or in any side jobs that you might have or any job that you used to have. Maybe you were younger and you worked at a burger joint or something, but all the different personalities of people that you've ever worked with and how that kind of jived, okay? Because in order to be a great teacher, you have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of others, and you have to experience it. And many of us have experienced many different types of personalities, okay? If you have a waitress or a receptionist, for that matter, and they're very shy and they don't like to talk to people, how would that work out in that particular job? It might not work very well, right? So personality does play a big part in our jobs. Character is a major thing, but personality is also very, very important. Before we jump into personality totally, I want to jump into just a couple things that our first teacher covered. I want to focus on point number 2 on the previous page before we get started, because it's very important that we have our mind set for what we're about to get into. It says, point 2, focus on practicing self-control in all situations. Now, as teachers, I want you to remember, when we think of self-control, sometimes we have the misconception that when someone loses self-control, that means that they're upset and they're blowing up at everybody. Shake your heads if sometimes you have that in your mind. Did you know that if your supervisor gives you an instruction and you don't follow it, you have not practiced self-control? Because self-control would be to do what you're asked to do of your supervisor, right? So it's not about somebody blowing up all the time and getting upset and wanting to do screaming and yelling and throwing things at the wall. Sometimes that's what we have in our mind. It's a misconception. It takes a lot of self-control to, no matter what kind of mood we're in, to just do what we're asked to do. Because as people, and this is what we're training and teaching the teachers, when you're working with your people, people don't like to be told what to do, 1. People do not like to be corrected, number 2. Raise your hand if you just absolutely love when people come point out one of your mistakes. There are no hands up in the auditorium. We get a little embarrassed, and sometimes embarrassment, which can turn to another emotion. What am I thinking of? Anger, right? Because remember, and which can turn to rage. Remember, anger being a secondary emotion, there's always something that triggers that. So when you get upset, mad, angry at someone, this is what you're teaching. You have to think to yourself, well, why did what she said or he said, depending on if you have a male boss or female boss, why did what they said cause that feeling within me? Why did I get mad? Why am I angry, right? So this program teaches us to analyze these things, because we don't get angry for no reason. You don't get up in the morning and go, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to be angry. Yep, everyone I encounter today, I'm just going to let loose a bunch of anger on them. That's not what we do. But sometimes we get embarrassed, sometimes certain circumstances take place, and it causes that anger to rise up within us. Now, as the teachers, we're teaching them to use the character trait of humility and self-control, because you have to be very humble to be able to follow that instruction, no matter what kind of mood you're in, no matter what kind of mood your supervisor's in, because supervisors are not always in a great mood. I mean, you just might want to know that if you go teach at any kind of factory or plant, you might not encounter a supervisor that is always in a great mood, right? But the obedience and the willingness to follow the instructions, to be on time, to do what you're instructed to do, and to follow the rules in the work area, that helps that supervisor that might not be in such a great mood to possibly calm down, possibly get over their mood. So we can play a part. With my supervisor, I've sometimes had to be quiet, apologize for a wrong I might not have done. How many of you have ever done that? They're upset. They're upset. You're hearing about that. They're upset, but you know you didn't do that. But you're just, well, I apologize. Okay, all right. Well, how can I take care of it? Is there any way I can fix it? Offer the solutions. Well, I didn't do that. It was her. It was her. We get the bus and we roll over all of our coworkers. No, find a way to fix it and make the job of the supervisor easier. Okay? That's important. That's very important. And supervisors, we're teaching them that they have a role in this too, because we've got to be careful, right? Supervisors have to be careful on how they interact with those that they supervise as well. It's not just one-sided. So remember, self-control, page 8, self-control unit, we learned this. Self-control is needed in all situations. All situations. In fact, I want to read that because I had it as a slide, but the power went down. And so I want to still read it, if I can find it for you. Page 8. Self-control is needed in every situation. You need self-control whether you're alone, interacting with others, at home, work, even when you're having fun. At work, you need self-control even when everyone's in a great mood. Your supervisor can be in a great mood. All your coworkers, everybody's in a great mood. You're in a great mood and everyone's in a great mood and they're laughing, and a customer walks in. Let's say you're in sales. Customer walks in. Nobody acknowledges the customer because we're all in such a great mood that the poor customer doesn't get waited on. So do you see how important it is to practice self-control even when you're in a great mood? It's not always about blowing up, getting upset, but you can actually lose self-control even when you're in a great mood. Does everybody understand that? Because that's what we're teaching. It's not about only getting upset. Self-control enables you to speak and behave appropriately regardless of the choices that are placed in front of you or the situations that you are in. Okay? And then also, in that point number 2, it says, let there be light. The power is on. Wow. Okay. In point number 2 there, where it says, always choosing to do the right thing, that's a right choice. And a right choice, I want to remind you, page 145, I had this little slide for you. It says, make a right choice. This is the acceptance unit, page 145. Whenever you're faced with a choice, consider the consequences of your actions. Consider the goals that you have set for yourself, and then make a decision. And this is very important. You make your decision on what will not bring harm to yourself. So when you're making that decision, you're not bringing harm to yourself, to others, and you're not jeopardizing your positive goals. And it's not going to risk your life, okay? So that's very important. I think she wants my slides. Now, I hope I don't have them as messed up now as it might just throw everything off, right? Okay, so now we're going to read on personality, of how does it affect the workplace? And we're on page 19 here. And it says, it's easy to confuse personality and character. So let's take a closer look at personality. because it also tells us about who we are. Remember, personality is made up of behavioral traits that are unique to each individual. Are anybody's personalities going to be exactly the same? No, and what we've learned even in previous, if you've been in this course from the beginning, you know that even identical twins do not have the same personality or character traits. They can be completely different, totally different. Personality is a combination, underline that word combination. Personality is a combination of your feelings, attitudes, and preferences. It's the basis by which you choose to interact with others. I want you to really get that sentence because that is big, teachers. Personality, it's the basis, the foundation, it's the reason. It's the reason that you choose to how you interact with others. If you have these different preferences and you're choosing how you're going to interact with other people based on your personality, that's big. For example, when you first meet someone, you notice that they smile, if they smile or not, or say hello. And remember, this is almost word for word from the character unit, page 23. So you can reference that in your workplace manual. Character unit, page 23, the first couple paragraphs are almost word for word identical. When you first meet someone, you notice if they smile, say hello. You might also notice if they're humorous, serious, or outgoing, or shy. Other aspects of your personality include such things as your preferences for food. I absolutely love food. So I have a preference for food. But it's certain types of food. Some people like spicy food. Some people like very bland food. I knew a woman that never used salt and pepper. And I was like, you never used salt and pepper like ever? And they were like, no, we just never grew up eating anything with salt and pepper on it. And I was just like, wow, I could not picture mashed potatoes without lots of salt and pepper on them. That's me. Other people might not. So foods, colors, hobbies. Do you eat things for taste only? Yeah, that would be me. I eat things for taste only. Or do you choose foods that are healthy? Do you like loud, bright colors, or do you like quiet, softer colors? These are personality. And you know, let's say you work with a bunch of people in an office, and they're like, well, let's decorate our office. You'd have to take into consideration everyone's preferences. You couldn't just say, well, look, I want lime green walls. And possibly lime green walls would drive one of your coworkers absolutely crazy, right? So you'd have to take into consideration these things and work it out peacefully. Some people choose hobbies for just to have activities, some of them for exercise, education. Our work relationships are strengthened by similarities in our personalities. Shared likes will usually motivate. I want you to really get this because we're going to talk about this for a few minutes because this is very important, okay? I'm not worried about how much we get through tonight because there's a lot of really content that I want to get. Our work relationships are strengthened by similarities in our personalities. Shared likes will usually motivate coworkers to get to know each other better. Does anybody know, is that working? Okay, so I wanted to show the acceptance unit, page 63. It's one of the slides because in the acceptance unit on page 63, we determined how we chose friends. Do you remember that? Now, you have coworkers, and it's great to get to know and to make friends at work. But if I am making friends at work because my coworker sitting next to me also doesn't like my boss, and we're going to talk about that together, and we build that strong relationship about that, is that a positive friendship? No, and it's going to bring the morale of the whole workplace down. So it's very important. I want us to remember the observation stage. Remember deciding to be friends? I have it on the screen for you. The introductory stage, the getting to know you stage, and the deciding factor. If somebody is causing, remember, if it jeopardizes us, our future with the company, remember, this is what we're teaching. our goals, our long-term goals, if it's going to bring any kind of hurt or harm to ourselves or others, the others might be your boss. Because how would a workplace shooting just take place? You have that secondary emotion, right? There's fuel, and then you can add fuel to the fire, or you can keep it calm. Do you notice how every time he comes in here, he's looking at us? I bet he thinks we're not working. Or why does he always have to point out every little mistake we made, dotting every I and crossing every T? I bet he never makes any mistakes, that boss of ours. Do you notice how he just nitpicks everything that we do? Well, and then you build this relationship, and it could be a friendship, but it's an alliance that is not right. And it's not going to further the person in the company. And remember, when we're teaching the people in the workplace, when we're teaching, we're going in there to teach, we want to teach them to have a peaceful work environment. Now, to do that would be to talk about peaceful things. If you have a coworker that's upset with the supervisor, then if you are a true friend, now I want you to be thinking about this in your mind. How would you want someone to react to you if they were a true friend and you didn't want to get fired, demoted, whatever? This is what we have to teach. Because the person that would side with us in that kind of situation, that's not a friend. And you got to observe. You've got to watch their actions. When they're corrected, do they have something to say? When the supervisor walks away. And it's usually said like that. Or maybe they're texting each other right from their computers. Or people work at computers, they've got cubicles. They're texting each other about the supervisor or the boss. Or another coworker. Did you see what she's wearing? Oh, that is so ridiculous. Send. So do you see how it's very important, and we learned that, to choose our friends very carefully in the workplace, because it can be our downfall. So that's page 63 of the acceptance unit. However, we can't be too quick to judge someone's personality, because they can have a great personality. I have worked with people. I've worked at all kinds of fast food restaurants. I've worked as a waitress. I've worked as a hostess. I've worked as one of those irritating phone people that call you up while you're eating dinner, asking you if you want your house remodeled. Yeah, I did that too. You always have coworkers. It's very important to get to know one another, because for certain jobs, you have to have a certain type of personality. And it might be fun, outgoing, somebody that you'd really think it would be fun to hang out with. But they're not going to build you up. You're not going to get the advancement in the company. You're not going to get that because it brings you down. It's very important. This is a very important part of the class. It's the same thing when you're trying to teach children, when we've covered the junior high unit, or the intermediate series, when they're choosing their friends. It's the same thing in the workplace. It's the same. It's the same exact thing. You wouldn't want your children in the preschool to be around somebody that's a bully and learning to hit and bite and scratch. Well, these people grow up and they're sitting next to you at work. You've got to be careful who you choose as your friends. The person who's quiet and reserved might appear to be conceited. You might think they're stuck up. I had a really great friend, and when I first met her, I thought she was really stuck up because she was very quiet and she didn't talk. And once we became friends, and we were close friends for many, many, many years, and I haven't seen her probably in about 6 years now. But she was quiet, very reserved, until you got to know her. And I finally confided in her, I just thought you were stuck up. And she said, no, I'm just really quiet until you get to know me, because, I'm not like you. Now you know how I am. I just talk and talk and talk. So I thought she was conceited, but you can't have that. You can't judge somebody like that. You just don't know. They really might be conceited, but they might not, right? The person who's talkative and frank might appear to be rude. Underline that. It's because I'm talkative. I want you to underline that. They might appear to be rude just because they talk a lot or they're just talkative. They might appear to be aggressive because if you're quiet and reserved, because my friend, she thought I was she didn't know how to take me at first. We ended up being the best of friends for many, many, many years, but we were so different. It's important to take the time to get to know others in order to appreciate who they are. Differences in personalities can cause serious conflicts within the workplace. Are you quiet and well organized? I'm neither quiet or well organized for anyone who knows me. I'm very talkative, and I can find anything if you give me enough time on my desk. Do you tidy up after yourselves in the break room while others leave spilled drinks, garbage all over the table? I don't do that. Working in an environment where personalities are opposite can be challenging, and if not handled appropriately, can cause resentment and hostility. The reason why this is so important is because you're going to have a mix of all of these in your work area. There's a place that I work right now, and it's funny because we have the person that likes to leave beverages everywhere. We all love her dearly, but we will be like, so-and-so, yeah, she knows it's hers. She comes and gets it and cleans it up. Then they'll come in my office and say, I laid that on your desk. And then it's up to me to find it, right? I'm telling you, I work with some people that are so organized. I look at their desks and I walk by and I'm like, so want to be like that one day. And like, how many of you are not as organized as you'd like to be? Show of hands. Great, be relatable when you're teaching these things. Because if you pretend to be the perfect person with all your stuff organized that never makes mistakes, they're not going to learn much from you. But if you can admit your mistakes and be humble and let them know that your desk is messy, they might come up to you after class and give you some tips. So it's a win-win situation. So you're going to have these personality clashes with character as well. Now, we have to control our thoughts. Even if somebody spills their drinks all over the place, we have to control our thoughts because it's very easy. I can't stand up here and lie. It's very easy to say, I've told her 1,000 times not to leave her drink there, and it's spilled all over the papers. And, Mr. So-and-so was expecting those papers on his desk, and I have this presentation, and now there's Coke all over them. So it's very easy to start having these hot thoughts. Remember we learned about the hot thoughts? But we have to control our thoughts, even about our coworkers, supervisor. If your supervisor is the one that's leaving the drinks everywhere, we got more of an issue to deal with. But we have to control these thoughts because we can't be having these negative thoughts because then when we deal with the person, we're automatically going to, when we see the person walk in the door with a drink, we're going to be like, here she comes with that Coke. Let me watch where she puts that Coke down. We don't want to be like that. We want to allow everyone the opportunity to grow and to be able to learn to put their Coke in the right place, right? Very important. So we got to guard our thoughts. Some people, their personalities can be annoying. I worked with a person one time that had a pen, and they clicked it whenever they were thinking about something. Now, if you're trying to concentrate on something and you're hearing the pen clicking, it can be annoying. But you have to control your thoughts, and you have to learn how to deal with one another in a way that's productive, because you could say to that person, do you mind not clicking your pen because I'm really trying to concentrate and it's kind of causing me to be distracted? Or you could say, something a little bit more severe or harsh. We have control over how we respond, and we've learned that through all the course that we've taken so far. So when we're teaching this in the workplace, we've got to remember everything that we've learned so far. Remember the RESPOND acronym? Does everybody remember that? RESPOND, the REACT acronym. Remember those things and rehearse those, because in the workplace, it's necessary. Do I always respond 100% right? I'm not going to stand up here and say yes at this point. That's why I'm in this program. I'm in this program. I'm teaching it, and I'm learning it as I teach it. And I'm trying to live it, right? And that's the important thing. So when a supervisor comes to you and says, you know, I failed. What do you mean you failed? I can't do it. I tried to implement your program, everything that was taught in the workshop that you gave, and, you know, it's just not working. I find that I'm falling short. And then just say, okay, let's add the word yesterday to that, and we'll try again tomorrow or today, right? Because don't we have an opportunity to start every day in our journey to having that positive character? So we can't lose hope, right? If you lose hope, and if you lose faith in one another, then the person might as well not even try because nobody's got faith in them anyway. You already think, well, they're never going to overcome that. They're just never going to be a great worker, or they're always going to spill their drinks everywhere. Now it says personality clashes in the workplace can result in character clashes as well. The quiet, neat, organized person working next to the loud, disorganized coworker. I have to tell you a quick story. Hopefully I'll get all my stories out this week since the power went out, and then I can just get into full-blown teaching next week. But I was in a box with a woman for many years, and I call it a box because we were in an office together. And it was like a box, and I had a window and she had a window. We had desks in front of the windows, and we were in there together for 8 or 9 hours a day. This woman was so organized. I mean, her pens were color-coded, all organized. My pens were all over the table. I couldn't even find one half the time. Her folders were, like, her desk looked perfect, and my desk just looked a mess, and we sat next to each other. And sometimes she would go over and try to tidy up my side. But I couldn't find anything. And she'd be like, no, I made it, all these files are here, and all your pens are here. And I would try to keep it that way for a couple days, but it just wouldn't work for me. I needed the pens out where I could grab them quickly. You know, that's just how I worked. She tried really hard, but we had some character clashes as well. We worked it out, and we're great friends to this day. But it can turn into things that are not so great if everybody's not trying to strive for that positive moral character. And that's why, you know, it's very important. The whole reason that we're here is because we're trying to teach the positive moral character. We're going to have differences. We are going to have a lot of differences. But we can't cause harm or hurt to ourselves, to one another. So if you know something hurts somebody else, a coworker, don't say it, don't do it. And don't do anything that's going to jeopardize anyone's life or your goals. And remember, that office gossip, that is one that can really tear down our goals. I know we had a lot of issues tonight because of the power being out, but at least it came on for the last few minutes. So we'll take up here next week, and I promise to know what page I'm on when I start. All right? So we'll meet back here next week, and everybody, thank you for coming, and have a great night.